or is it just us seeing video?
Yeah, so the live listeners will see
Okay.
the video. It will be on YouTube. Yep,
All right.
and
Just I was adjusting my lighting for that reason.
perfect. Thank you. Awesome. So we are live, and I'll do a little intro here. That can be our edit point. Welcome to Command Control Power. We are very pleased to be joined once again by returning guest Adam Engst of TidBITS. Adam, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's always a fun.
Part
Great
of
to
the
see you.
SNL Five Timers Club, I think, or
Yeah,
something along
exactly.
those lines.
That
For
means I know
sure.
where like the secret stuff in the green room is.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. So, what's new in your world on this, occasion of the 50th anniversary of Apple here? The birthday month.
Well, actually, if we're talking really new,
Yeah.
we have this Slack bits work group that we've had forever. I can't remember, we started 2013, something like that.
Hmm.
And someone just texted me because a bad actor of some sort impersonated Glenn Fleischman, sent him a
Whoa.
message, and got him to download something that was malware, an info stealer.
Whoa.
Oh man.
That's
And I'm
crazy.
like, how is this possible? Like, 'cause like when we
Yeah.
set up Slack, I didn't know you could. I mean, I don't think you could change your display name. But so like there are
Ah,
literally two at Glenn Fleischman's,
Wow.
exactly
wow.
the same, other than the email address.
Huh.
And
That's
this guy,
crazy.
knew he'd been following Glenn for years.
Huh.
Yeah.
So, and it was sort of like a trusted person in a trusted location. The
Wow.
message was a little funky, but not like alarm bells. I mean,
Sure.
it wouldn't have caught me because I know Glenn better. But if you just sort of knew Glenn as a
Ah,
person who writes about stuff, it
Wow.
wasn't entirely stupid. And so I'm like, what the hell? Like,
yeah.
and so I'm
Wow.
actually now faced with this question of, do I shut down the entire community? Because I don't know who's in there now. Like,
Wow.
if this
Yeah.
person got in there and was a, because like it was public, it was meant to be public. But if
Yeah.
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
can now get in there and impersonate anyone else,
Wow.
now they can't now because I changed it so they can't just change their display names. But
But if
still,
they're already in there,
they're
yeah.
already in there. And I mean, like, I know which account this one was, but there
Right.
are definitely others that I don't think are real. And
Hmm.
so it's an interesting question. We don't use it for much. We use it mostly for chatting during Apple Live events. Like
Okay.
that's the time when it's fun to like everyone to kind of make comments and while
Totally.
Apple announces stuff.
Right.
But so
Yeah.
like I might have to break the whole thing down because I don't think it's safe anymore.
Yeah. How do you route out, like a mole, so to speak, like at that point, I mean, if
Yeah.
you, especially like you said, if they may have joined and already, they're just sitting there in the background impersonating somebody and waiting for an opportunity.
Well, and so, like, so I used, you can do this invite links, which, and
Hmm.
then it in Slackbot then tells you who has used the invite link. So I
Okay.
get these periodically, and usually it's like, an event's coming up, and I'm posting it, I write about it in Tidbits, and 5 or 10 people sign up. Fine,
Sure.
whatever. But this has been going on for so many years, and when we started, it was kind of Slack was kind of cool and new. So we have
Yeah.
1,400 people in this group,
Nice.
Wow.
and so like and like I went through and again at some point it was possible for people to invite other people, and so
Yeah.
I'm like, there's a lot of people from like this email address that have like invited all their like 5 or 6 of them, like,
Right.
and they don't, that's not something I recognize. I mean, it seems semi-legitimate, but
Yeah.
it was definitely one of those situations where like I don't know what this is, and so I feel like there's a lot of addresses in there that look dubious to me as someone who looks at a lot of email addresses. Like,
For sure.
it feels like a fake Gmail address to me. Like
Yeah.
it's too fakey looking. And so
Right.
it's right. So it's like there could be hundreds of people in this who are not real in some sense of the word.
This is an interesting topic. I mean, we want to get into, of course, like I mentioned, the occasion of Apple's 50th anniversary, and and some of the writing you've done around that, recently and
Yeah.
over all these years. But actually, we've got a lot more pressing issues I mean, like the one you're describing, and also I wanted to get your take on Anthropic's announcement about Mythos, which
Mythos,
is
yeah.
really, really interesting.
Hmm.
Project Glasswing as a response to that. I guess it was Rich Mogul, who wrote this article on
Yeah.
TidBITS, your security editor and chief analyst at the Cloud Security Alliance. He wrote this piece called "What Anthropic's Mythos and Project Glasswing Mean for Your Apple Devices." So I want to kind of get into that, but just speaking broadly about this, this is sort of looming over the industry right now. I don't know if most people realize this. I think it was really easy to write off initially as, okay, AI companies have been doing this since the beginning, a few years ago at least, saying, oh, our new model is really scary. It's really bad. It's so powerful. Like, you don't even want to know how powerful it is, and we better, Sam Altman is like, regulate us. We can't handle this. Please regulate us. So there's a lot of this marketing hype around like our new technology is so dangerous. Like, maybe you should give us a bunch of money so we can properly develop it. But this really actually seems like there's something to it. And so what's your kind of immediate, hot take on this Mythos model that's coming
Well,
out?
and I will say that this is one of those ones where I do defer to Rich because Rich
Yeah.
lives this stuff.
Mhm.
And so when this came out, in our other Slack workspace, which is just for TidBITS people, we were immediately talking about it. And he comes off as more measured in the article than he does when he was just talking about it.
Very interesting.
You
Wow.
know, that
Okay.
that basically it's not a surprise to the security community. Like they've known this is coming,
Yeah.
but simultaneously it's still kind of a holy crap moment.
Yeah.
When they find a 27-year-old bug in OpenBSD and a 16-year-old bug in FFmpeg, like these are real. I mean, and they were pretty clear about how, like, okay, maybe they're exaggerating, but like, we can only tell you about 1% of them. We can't tell you about the other 99% because they haven't been fixed yet.
Yeah.
And let's assume they're exaggerating.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, those are really, really big bugs in long-standing software.
Yeah.
And so, and in some sense, it's more of a problem when it's going to be aimed at the kinds of systems where you're a hospital or a bank or a school, or you have these weird old custom systems that you can't really change easily, and suddenly they can the attackers can, anytime they can get some kind of access, they can beat on things or find bugs in ways that they couldn't have before.
Yeah.
And those aren't as easily patched. Like in some sense, like OpenBSD, FFmpeg, they're just going to patch those immediately. Like that's why those bugs, they released them, because they're now patched. But it's a lot of software is sort of in constant use. It doesn't go through release cycles in quite the same way.
Interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the frameworks I'm using to kind of analyze this is this concept of like the asymmetry of destruction versus creation. I read a piece that kind of encapsulated this. It's by an author, Michael Bateman, on I think it's on Substack. I'll link to it in our show notes. But basically what it illustrates is that it's way easier to destroy something than to create something. So, the stakes are so high for the software like you're referring to, where, 1 0-day bug, a 0-day means that the developer doesn't know about it. No one knows about it except for the hacker. These are bugs that are basically looming over us that could, bring down a system that's really hard to build back up again. So, these hackers can really do a lot of damage that's not easy to solve. So it's easy to find the problem, easy to exploit the problem, and now these tools are making that much easier. So apparently what Mythos can do is you can say, here's like a version of OpenBSD, like you mentioned, or here's, a software package like Google Chrome or something, try to find a bug that will crash the software, or try to find a bug. And you could basically just tell Mythos to do this,
Right.
let it run overnight. And you come back to, hey, I found this bug and here's how to exploit it. So now a hacker with that information can do a lot of destruction. Whereas, solving this problem might be much harder to sort of coordinate, might be much harder to find the solution in the first place, and certainly to deploy it before the bad actors get after it.
So there's a lot to unpack there. one of the things is I don't think of it. I mean, the destruction and creations is certainly true, but I think of it a little bit more as red team, blue team scenarios. So Cory Doctorow has a wonderful book called Red Team Blues, which, like, I'm not a security guy, so this is my kind of best example of like how these terms are used. But red team is attackers. And it's always easier to attack because you only have to find one way in.
Yeah.
If you're blue team and you're defending, you have to block every possible way in.
Yeah.
That's
another asymmetry.
You don't know which one's going to get found, so you have to find as many as possible and block all of them. Right. So that's sort of thing one. Thing two is that in some sense, defenders do have an advantage, at least in the examples I was giving of like, where there's source code and you are deploying versions, because the attackers, this is a little bit more of a different issue with open source, right? But like with Apple's stuff, the attackers do not have access to Apple's source code. They can only attack from the outside. Right. Whereas the defenders can run Mythos against the source code itself and have it look for patterns that are going to explain problems and solve them that way. So that's a place where the defenders actually have an advantage. Right. The third thing is that, I mean, we make it sound like, oh, you can just run Mythos overnight. And to an extent, that's true. But if you actually read Anthropic's article about what they're doing, it cost to find the OpenBSD bug, it was only $50 for the actual prompt that found it. Okay. But they had to spend $20,000 in compute to get there.
Okay.
Because it's multiple passes, like it's just iterating over things and passing over the source code. So it's not any particular one, but they had to do all the others. It was one of many tries.
Sure, but the leverage there is still extremely high. Like you spend $20,000, you spend $50,000, just call it $100,000. On finding this one bug in software that's everywhere, and they can sell that bug for $1 million or whatever.
Yeah, there's no question that it does create this interesting financial equation, because people at home not doing this. You do need some significant compute. Not really the compute itself, because like Mythos only runs on Anthropic's infrastructure, so you actually literally need to be able to use Mythos in 6 months, something similar.
Or
but
in 6
this
weeks.
level of model is not going to be running on your Mac Studio with a lot of RAM anytime soon. Yeah. So there is a little bit of a barrier, but as you say, organized crime, nation states, they don't care.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's not going to be your average hacker, but there is money there to do this. So
no. Now the other side of it, actually, though, is that imagine your classic small developer. They don't have the financial resources to do this kind of thing. So, and I mean, probably not an issue like we're thinking, like, it's not like, oh, little Mac developers are going to be attacked because Apple's hopefully hardening Mac OS against the apps themselves. Right. But there are a ton of open source components, libraries, things that people use without a whole lot of vetting. And, can all of those afford to be run through Mythos or the equivalent? I guess, in the, like, my head just blows up nonstop these days. I think ChatGPT, OpenAI just announced, was it GPT 5.4 Cyber? Which is their version of this, and I'm like, come on, you people! Like, give me at least a moment to breathe.
I know. A day or so after the Anthropic announcement, OpenAI was like, "Well, we have something really scary too." It's like,
this is scary. We're just as bad.
Yeah. One theory I had, because like a few months ago, or maybe not even a few months, it was probably a month ago, the Anthropics, sort of parted ways with the Pentagon, I guess, over this controversy around like the Pentagon wanted, full access to all of their technology, and Anthropic wanted to have certain like limits in place in the contract. I wonder if this was it. It's like if they have this new model and they want to like carefully, like bring in trusted, like software developers and things like Apple and other big companies. And the Pentagon says, well, we want to get in there at the same time or first. That's interesting. And now, of course, with the deal with OpenAI, they apparently don't have the same kind of limitations. We thought it was about, autonomous weapons and surveillance and things like that. It could have also been like hunting for 0 days that they can then exploit and put in backdoors and software and stuff. And yeah.
There are times when it's often very difficult to understand the levels at which everything goes on. But I don't disagree with you. This could have been a situation where Anthropic feels that this is a dangerous level, that to do. Then of course you get into all sorts of philosophical questions of whether, what are private companies allowed to do and not do. And, and I mean, the simple answer is well, if you don't want to sell to the government, you don't have to sell to the government. I mean, there's a different issue. There's a different question. If you wish to be selling to the government in certain ways, but not in other ways, that's a little trickier. I do feel as though we have really gone down rabbit holes that we did not anticipate, not even many years ago, in terms of who can be trusted with what. And
exactly,
right,
could we trust Anthropic? Well, I don't know, not hugely. But do we trust all the other parties in play? Not hugely.
Yeah. Well, the closest like analog we have is nuclear technology, and that was developed by the government, and so inherently, they were able to regulate it by just having that control from the beginning, and having treaties with other nations that gained access to this technology. And also with nuclear, you have like, if you're talking about nuclear weapons, you need access to like what do they call it, like
visible materials,
uranium and things like that, and then refine that. And you need like certain technology to be able to refine it. And so you have these like leverage points where you can exert control, like you can make it so it's hard to get. I mean, first of all, it is already hard to get, like to mine that type of material and refine it. And so, you need access to that, and that's kind of a barrier to entry. Whereas, with this type of technology, it started in the private sector. I mean, side point there, like if the private sector has it, you have to wonder what like the NSA has. I mean, there's no way that they're like, well, how did they do that? This is amazing. We'll never get there. Like, I'm sure as soon as like, ChatGPT came out, like the government, doubled down on their, projects to figure this out, and probably hired some people away or whatever. So they're probably already doing it, but the cat's out of the bag. Like we know more or less how to build a model, train the model, and, develop it into a product. And you need, as you put earlier, like a heavy amount of compute that's not inaccessible though. And some people say, to regulate AI properly, we should limit like access to GPUs. We should limit access to, the different types of technology that they need to be able to do this. But to your point earlier, like it's in the private sector's hands right now. Should it be, should we regulate it on, should it, how do you reckon with this? Is anybody's guess?
I literally don't know. I mean, and I think it's also worth noting that, as you say, that other people can develop this. We've seen. I mean, China has more big AI companies than the U.S. From what I gather, they're generally considered to be 6 months behind.
Right.
Oh boy, 6 months. I know when 6 months from now is going to be. I mean, it's October. The world could be changing in October. That's the level of when you think about this stuff. And so I really I think, and to be fair, Anthropic's in a really interesting position. I mean, kind of what would you do it gets into a whole lot of issues which I don't think most of us are trained to deal with, honestly. In
Right.
terms of ethics and governance and that kind of thing. And we are in a world where authority entities of all sorts have basically lost a whole lot of trust with the public.
Yeah, we don't have
And
the trust of institutions, and yet we have the the biggest need we've ever had to
right,
to have reliable gatekeepers for information. We're being sort of corroded by the social media algorithms, like still,
yeah,
and everybody says do your own research. Well, okay, but like, should we wear a mask or not? Like, I'm not going to go study that. I need
Yeah.
the answer now. So, yeah,
That's
yeah,
Mythos.
and
Let me tell you.
and I mean the fact
yeah,
that do your own
right,
research has become a catchphrase for I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah,
yeah,
You know,
true.
it's
It's true.
it's like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, like you can't disagree with the words on the face of them, but realistically, even when you quote unquote do your own research, there's so many materials out there that are designed to deceive. We're not
totally,
even
yeah,
talking AI. Like, forget the AIs. This was people
yeah,
doing.
right,
And so you bring the AIs into it, and just yet one more thing. I mean, I honestly, I will say that I do have a science fictiony way forward,
okay,
which I hope is not that far off.
hmm
Which I've actually been. I don't know if I've been writing about it exactly because it was too science fictiony, but I've been thinking about this for years and years and years. Which is that I think we need basically agents, autonomous AI agents that are working for us as individuals.
hmm,
Like right now, our iPhones are protected because Apple is protecting them.
hmm
You know, but and that's good. I'm not complaining about that. But the fact is that requires Apple to be, spreading this stuff widely, whereas a lot of people, like the person who was just targeted on my Slack channel, a lot of people are targeted directly,
right,
and by phishing, whatever. It's and there's not much to do with that. I mean, like, this guy fell for something because it was really, really believable, and he's
right,
actually like an IT admin and privacy person, so he was really embarrassed. um
yeah,
but the fact is like, what if we had an agent who was sitting, like, at your router,
hmm
looking at your traffic, working only for you, not reporting back to anyone, not a software as a service, no accounts, like
right,
literally code that you run on your machines locally, that
yeah,
is always looking out for you,
hmm
and looking at incoming traffic, looking at outgoing traffic, doing that kind of thing. I mean, again, we've got little hints of it. I mean, there's, what do they call them, border routers for enterprises that do this sort of stuff.
right,
That scan for enterprise data that should never leave the network.
Right.
right,
So we've got the models, but what we don't have is this stuff running on local devices saying that, like, my device should never be sending my credit card or my passwords or
yeah,
things like that. Like, and I'm sure we could extend this. It's science fiction. We could extend it any way if we want, but I really do feel as though we need individual protections at this point that are not provided by some entity in the sky. Who do we trust them? I mean, yeah, we
Right.
generally trust Apple,
right,
but
right,
I mean, there's certainly lots of other companies that we don't trust and who are
hmm
still running things on our devices.
Adam, I'm curious. I mean, I don't know that it's as science fictiony as you say. Like it's not.
mm,
Please,
I
I
mean,
hope I'm wrong. I hope it's revealed tomorrow.
I mean, with the ability of local AI models and things like that, I mean, I don't know that it's potentially that far off from what you're saying as to be a consumable thing, not just for enterprise.
Yeah,
So I think it's very possible, and I think that you need something to advocate for you, artificial intelligence or otherwise, to be able to help protect your domain.
right.
The question is, can they go rogue on their own? Like, can
right,
something?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a real question, and I mean,
Yeah.
I do think this sort of thing would have to be, like, it would have to be an open source where like everyone could look at its code and all that kind of scenario to make sure that it was what it said it was.
Yeah.
And would Apple allow us to run it on our devices? I don't know. That's another thing. Apple doesn't trust other people either. But it feels as though we are, we as individuals, even if we're representatives of a company, are basically just told to be careful all the time. Install your updates, be careful, use good passwords. Like, all that's good, but it doesn't, it still feels like we're very much playing a weak blue team, right? The red team can come in with all they got at us, and we're like, oh, I use good passwords, like that's all I can do. I want something in there going like, this traffic came in, it was suspicious, I blocked it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting model. I mean, the concern is then, you're just kind of, the problem is moving more and more upstream, because then, these models that we're running as our little personal defenders could then be exploited, by a hacker that's going to develop a workaround for that. I mean, just like we work around the guardrails that these companies put in place on their models. Like, how do I build a bomb that can kill as many people as possible? I'm not going to, the AI model responds, I'm not going to answer that. I can't, then you're just like, pretend you're in a play, and it's like whatever those original kind of like workarounds
do it
were.
in musical comedy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, then you get the answer you want. So like, the hackers can, I mean, it happens all the time where it's a cat and mouse game. They find some way to route around the protections that we have in place. So
that said, I think the fact that we've got that we do have AIs now that are increasingly gaining capabilities, and you look at the OpenClaw stuff, which scares me silly at the moment, but but like it's definitely going in that direction. What we used to have in essence were like virus signatures, right? You'd be running software to look for the signatures on your drive at all times, and or look at your be checking your downloads, and those were really easily circumvented because they were deterministic. Whereas if you have this agent running, and it's an AI agent that can, in theory, be updating its awareness of its environment, maybe that gives you you're no longer a deterministic target. Put it that way.
Yeah. Exactly. We have to become more sophisticated with our defenses as the attacks get more sophisticated as well. Going back to Mythos and just kind of what it means and analyzing, whether there's a real concern. It occurs to me that, again, with the marketing angle, that's an easy way to say, it's overblown, and yet they're promoting this plan, this Project Glasswing, to lots of big tech companies who are engaging with them, so they believe it enough to know that there is a real concern there. So it may not be as overblown as we might hope. The other concern is kind of a secondary effect, which is like hackers that may be sitting on 0 days are now incentivized to sell them like quickly, because they will likely be found by the vendors and patched before they can go to market. And so, in other words, like the way this stuff works is, like, let's say I'm a hacker and I discover that there's a vulnerability in, some like Mac OS, and that's not patched by Apple. I might, sell it to a nation state for $1 million, or I might be holding out for 5 million. And if I think, well, they're going to patch it any day now because this Project Glasswing is going to help them find it, I better just sell it and put it out there. So we may be like accelerating sort of like the low hanging fruit of like 0 days that are already kind of, out there, just not currently being used, or not being used as widespread. They might be used by a nation state only, but someone else, has access to it, and now they're going to start to sell it to some of the secondary and third, market.
It's hard to know. I don't know enough about that market to know like how people, like what the economics of it are in terms of like holding on to things. Like if you want to, you may want to sell it quickly before someone else finds it, because then the value of what you've got goes to zero. And similarly, just because you've found a vulnerability that you can sell doesn't mean that whoever buys it, weaponizes it into an exploit or we don't know how they weaponize it into exploit. So it could be, if it's nation state, they could be more interested in a very targeted exploit that they're going to use against a particular person who they want to get.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's organized, right, or
Right.
people or type class of people, but any event.
Right.
Whereas an organized crime, they're just interested in making money. So they're probably going to weaponize it in such a way that it can be more generally used. So I mean, we looked at, you see the Karuna and Dark Sword exploits. They were kits that like put together numerous exploits to be able to take over things, and both were like, they may have started in this relatively rarefied, I'm going to target this type of person or this particular person, but they for whatever reason ended up being sold on the market and then being used in watering holes where they could get anyone.
Yeah.
So
you wrote an article about Dark Sword just a few weeks ago. Now, it's how fast this moves. About how it was at that time threatening iOS 18, and Apple had not, patched it in iOS 18. Apple, still supports iOS 18, but it doesn't get all of the security improvements. And there's always this question of like, how long will they support it? Well, they did go back and patch that exploit. I mean, it's obviously the right thing to do.
And it was actually more complicated than even that, because Apple had in fact patched the exploits that Dark Sword exploited already. They patched the vulnerabilities already, but what Apple does is they always rescind the signing certificate for older versions of iOS at some point. So if you had like an iPhone 15 or something, like perfectly new iPhone running iOS 18, and you had waited because you didn't want to install iOS 26, you were vulnerable if you were somewhere between, like, I forget what it was, like iOS 18.7, 18.7.4 and 18.7 or no, 0.1 and 0.3 or something like that. It was a relatively tight window, but you could no longer get to 0.7, 0.5 and 0.7, 0.6 because Apple wouldn't let you. You had to go to 26. They would want you to go to
26, right? Okay.
And so what Apple did is they basically re-released that signing certificate and released 18.7.7. So you weren't forced to upgrade when all you wanted to do was update. I really like the difference between those terms. It's like it's an important, it's an important difference. Right. Like, I just want an update. I don't want an upgrade.
Right.
So
what's your take on why they handle that differently for iPhones versus Macs? So like iOS 18, like you said, I mean, it will run, like, and they could, there's no reason they wouldn't be able to keep updating it on those devices. The distinction is the device supports iOS 26, and so they just stopped supporting 18 for those devices. Now they are supporting it, but for the Mac, it's always been that they've continued to support, the previous two versions with updates. Is there a reason for that?
I think basically Apple has gotten themselves into like just two different two different mindsets. The iPhone is essentially an appliance, right? Like it should just work. And partly for that, and Apple has a vision of how it should just work, which always involves the latest version of the operating system. That's their vision of what the iPhone is and the iPad. With Macs, I think, there's just too much legacy history of how a Mac can be used to do different things in unexpected ways, and Apple knows that. And so you just can't say you can't install an old version of Mac OS on hardware that can run it.
Right.
And it's just like there's too many reasons why you might want to do that that go back to the depths of time. And so a lot of it's like even like peripherals, right? You need to use this old weird thing. Less true now, but you remember back 20 years ago, there was all sorts of weird hardware that people like, oh yes, it's my sequencer, like I sequence DNA with this, and like I can't upgrade because my sequencer doesn't talk to Panther or something. I'm stuck on Jaguar. So so that it was a lot of stuff like that, and I think that kind of is where we get that, because the iPhone and the iPad pretty standalone. There's not a lot that's going to break if you force someone to that. The App Store, much more constrained environment for the apps, where Apple has more control over the developers again. So you can just, it's like, the train's leaving, you'd better get on. And so that said, even with those, I mean, we saw with Corona going back to iOS 15 and 16, right? When the bugs are bad enough, and it's not there, it's just like some devices can't upgrade; they're too old, and yet they still work because Apple makes good hardware.
Yeah.
Like, damn you, good hardware.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so what I'm hearing is like basically Apple would love to treat the Mac the same as the iPhone and just force everyone onto the latest version. But, because of that kind of like baggage from all these years, maybe with drivers and hardware and, even third-party apps that just,
Yep.
won't update or whatever, they find that they have to for market
look at
forces, reasons.
how long they're supporting Rosetta 2. I mean, like, oh, it's going to go away in macOS 28. Well, except for those really old games.
Right.
They just can't, can't do it. And this is Apple. I mean, Microsoft would be like, okay, we're going to support that for another 22 years. And
exactly. Right.
I like the Microsoft voice.
Yeah.
22 years. So it's, I mean, and to be fair, when you talk to people who deal with like bad security stuff all day, it will scare you silly. Like I've been to talks by like FBI agents. Ithaca College nearby here has an ed tech day, educational technology day. And a couple of years ago, there was an FBI agent who came and talked about stuff, and I'm like, holy crap, the world sucks. This was back when hospitals were constantly getting taken over by ransomware and all this kind of stuff. And so like this is a really it is a really big bad world out there, and I believe that if you're in that world, it may even seem worse than it really is for most of us.
Yeah.
So I think Apple is in that world. I mean, if you look at it this way, you're Apple, you're Google. You have to assume that everything you do is under nonstop attack by the smartest people in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All the North Koreans, the Chinese, the Iranians, like, everyone who wants to break in for one reason or another, you're going to go after Apple and Google because, boy, you get into Apple and Google, you can get into a whole lot of other stuff.
Right.
And so, the security teams at those companies, Microsoft too, I'm sure, Amazon, I'm sure, because of AWS, the security at those places is next. It's not even next level. It's like multi levels more than, than that, because it has to be. They are under nonstop onslaught, automated, human, AI, the works. And so that does, on the other hand, color the way they see the rest of the world. Because, I mean, yes, I know people who've had trouble, but it's not like, people in my normal everyday life are saying, oh, I got hacked again.
Right.
It doesn't, it's just not that common a topic of conversation among normal people.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. But like you said, the target is really big for these huge companies. And, you have to look at the incentives around all this stuff. Like, why are they being attacked constantly by, people in foreign countries? Why are our clients occasionally being hacked by someone with a thick accent? It's because of the incentives. That person in a foreign country who doesn't have the same access to, jobs and job security and things that we do, there's just a huge wealth discrepancy there. And so, the incentive is for them to spend their day trying to find a victim that, could be the payout for that week or that month, and so the incentives are such that will happen.
Have you heard about again, this is just horrible stories. Basically the almost slavery scenarios with pig butchering schemes.
Pig butchering scams. Yeah, exactly.
That's not technical, but it's the same thing. It's an instance there is money out there for the taking. And that's all you have to have before it suddenly becomes a huge vulnerability.
I thought I was on the kind of forefront of the social justice kind of attitude of like when these people would call and try to scam me, and I obviously knew it was a scam. I would say, put me on your do not call list, and I hope you find honest work. Like that would be my parting word. I hope you find honest work. But the thing is, people are saying now, are you safe? Are you in danger? Are you being held against your will? Because the people that are doing these scams, like, it's almost, I mean, again, this is kind of what I was trying to get at. It's like, it's not really their fault. I mean, yeah, you hope that they
They're
would
literally
say,
captives. Yeah.
right. It's
In some
really,
cases.
it's really messed up.
Really messed up.
Yeah.
I just looked up because I actually didn't know what it was, the pig butchering schemes, and I looked it up, and I actually know someone that in my life that fell for something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And lost quite a bit of money. Actually,
Yeah.
I honestly did not know that was the name of, that was the terminology used for it.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because I'm 58, and although I spend my days doing tech stuff, I don't use social media at all. I don't watch TV. Well, I watch on Netflix, but like, I just, not like I'm watching the news or
Right.
kind of getting caught up in that kind of stuff. And there are just like, well, I live in a rural area. I was actually just at a conference in Virginia, so I was like, wow, cities are different. Like, there's a lot of people here. Like, things are different when you live in a city. And it was just, it was a little eye-opening, because I sort of feel like the world's moving really, really fast in a lot of bad ways.
Sure.
And to an extent, I want to say, like, just stop using social media. Don't be buying stuff nonstop. Go outside, talk to people. Like, if you like, those things don't have these problems for the most part. And so, but I realize that's I hate to use the term in some ways, it's a privileged situation. Like, not everyone can do that. But I do feel as though it's a little bit of not really get off my lawn, but like, things used to be easier.
Sure.
And they did. That this is just like what people are dealing with now in terms of of this just onslaught.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that we're trying to put guardrails on AI after the fact, it's the same thing with social media and everything that happened on the internet. It's a mess of just misinformation, disinformation, and to your point earlier, some people don't know who to believe when they're reading about something.
They should believe us. We're right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, believe me. Listen to this podcast, and I'm the one telling the truth. It's actually, I was just talking with my son about this, who's 17 years old, and we were just talking about, and he's aware, because I say it every other day, about how social media is like the worst of the worst in terms of just information gathering. Yeah. And at least he acknowledges it, for his age. But it's very difficult to tell someone, a young person growing in that age, that this is just hot garbage being delivered to you on a daily basis.
Totally.
Yeah. And it's hot garbage with many agendas, all of which are against you.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. The company at the top, guaranteed against you. All the providers down the chain against you. Yeah. The advertisers who are making it possible against you. Like, again, this is a little bit of why, like, I think sort of like, I want these agents protecting me. Yeah. Like, I want the agents, like, that's a bad idea. You don't want to go. You don't want to go to that site. You do not want to read this social media stuff. This is not a good idea. As long as it was working for me, and it was like, I knew what it was doing, so it wasn't like the nanny state or something. Yeah. I feel like that might be useful, because there is that level to which, I still remember when the games got really good and addictive, and it was like, this isn't fair. Madison Avenue is really good at making things addictive. Like, they've got decades of experience, and now we mere mortals, oh, this is a fun game. Well, yeah, it's a fun game until you're playing it for 6 hours a day. If it, and the Candy Crushes and Angry Birds. I mean, like, the Angry Birds guy, like, took it away because he was embarrassed at having done this to people. Like, that's kind of the behavior we need. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin your lives.
I mean,
to some degree, I wonder.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, you can go back all the way to pre-internet stuff, back to cigarettes, when they were marketing to kids and all this stuff.
Right.
I was just joking about this with my sister, because I was at like a candy store in Austin, and they had the old gum cigarettes, that used to like blow this powdered smoke out of.
Yep.
It's so ridiculous that was something we used to walk around smoking cigarettes as kids.
Yeah. Just pretending for now, but like getting ready for the day when you could actually smoke. Like
exactly, because it was cool. It was
it was cool.
That,
right. And they encourage that. Yeah. Well, I mean, in some ways, I think like it is the basis of the internet. Like, is the fundamental flaw the advertising model? Because if you look at like the addictiveness of games, the addictiveness of consumerism, like our economy is dependent on like getting people to buy crap that they don't need, and then and so like they're putting billboards in your face, they're putting ads on websites to get you to buy things, to keep the whole engine going. And you have to try to be like a little better than everyone else and not fall for it, and like let everyone else fall for like buying this crap. But the fundamental problem is the advertising, model, because that's why we need to get people addicted to spending as much time as possible online.
I absolutely agree with that. And then I would say that the other thing, which I did not anticipate. Keep in mind, I'm super early on the internet. I wrote the 5th internet book. So I've been.
We want to talk about that, by the way.
I've been doing this for a long time. And there was a lot of early idealism for the internet, and I was totally on that camp. That like it's better when people talk to each other, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. Sure. I think the thing that we did not understand then, and I'm not sure. Well, we certainly don't understand now, is the finiteness of the human brain and attention span. And we do badly when faced with the infinite on a nonstop basis.
Yeah. The infinite scroll is also a huge problem.
The infinite scroll, the infinite number of friends, the infinite number of articles that are great. Like I'm not even talking bad stuff. There's an infinite amount of good stuff. Wikipedia. Oh, good. You could read Wikipedia? No, you can't read Wikipedia. I mean, like Wikipedia makes Encyclopedia Britannica. Like you could see the shelf in the background. Like you could see that. You could say, I'm going to work my way right through that, and it was not like going to be easy, but it was sort of possible.
Yeah.
Whereas
it was
Wikipedia,
finite, technically. Yeah.
Right. It was finite. Wikipedia, not finite for all practical purposes.
Right.
And just like, when we hit the whole, like, again, social networking, like we can't actually know that many people. It's not good for us. There are those, I forget the researcher's name who figured out like, you can have like, 10 people in your, like 7 people in your family and 15 people in your, or extended,
the Dunbar's number.
Dunbar's number, yes.
Right. Is it like 150 or something like that? Is like the maximum size of like any one person's like possible social network, like for who you can actually develop a relationship with enough to know like that you can build a trust and a rapport in person. Like that's the limit. I mean, that should have been a Facebook limit from the beginning. Like it would be a different world.
And similarly, the idea that, and this gets into equity as well, but the idea that, and I certainly took advantage of it, that there were no more barriers. There were not financial barriers to reaching the world with your ideas. I was able to start TidBITS for nothing. And get tens of thousands of subscribers, whereas that sort of thing took big bucks before. It took a printing press. Literally, freedom of the press goes to those who have one. And I'm not saying that's there's issues with that, certainly, but again, we didn't understand the level to which like, you don't necessarily want everyone to be able to do that. And now that you have social media people with millions of followers.
Can we just talk about Joe Rogan for a second? I mean, the problem is like, so this is like a guy from news radio who got a podcast. Like, it's like, I mean, you remember that show, right? Yeah, it's like, the nerd tech dork kind of guy. Like, I mean, he was very relatable in the show and everything. And then like, he starts a podcast, a humble little podcast, and it blows up. And he's like, I'm just this guy. I'm like, whatever he does, mixed martial arts or something. Like, he's like, it's like, people listen. Like, it's not my fault. It's kind of his whole explanation now. There needs to be responsibility that comes with these massive platforms like this, and he like, how could I not get into his head? Like, there's a responsibility that comes with having such a huge audience.
Yes. Right? And I mean, that's the old Spider-Man thing, with power comes responsibility. But, I do think, I mean, one of the suggestions that I've seen that I actually think is actually pretty reasonable if we didn't have social media companies that just suck so badly, is that no one should be having those kinds of audiences. Like, you should not be able to publish to 2 million people, what like with the click of a button and and a photo. And if basically there were a sort of a limit on the number of people who could follow anyone, then that would cut down a huge amount of these problems, because it wouldn't you wouldn't be able to have random behaviors and attitudes and posts just suddenly be spreading incredibly quickly. It could still spread, but it would have to be actually network spread, as opposed to just one source. Boom.
It goes back to the advertising model, though, because the more followers, the more you make, and that's just it. It all stems from that.
And these people are making big bucks as influencers. I mean, influencers is such a terrible term too.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's literally what they do is they are influencing culture. I mean, and they're.
And did you see, what is it? Coachella, I think. Something I don't really know very much about. They're worried now because they have AI influencers who are like using AI faked photos of them with the stars who are actually at Coachella and putting them up on their Instagrams. Like, this is like it's fake turtles all the way down.
All the way down. Oh, no.
Like, again, just if you don't do the social media thing, your life gets a whole lot better.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry about the AI slop, because I never see AI slop. Literally don't see it, because I don't do social media.
I'll spend some time on Reddit here and there, and a post will catch my eye. I'll be interested in reading about it. A lot of the stuff I encounter is probably bordering on conspiratorial in some cases. I kind of like that, because I like to read it and say, like, I don't believe this. Actually, that sounds a little bit plausible, but it's like the kind of thing you can sort of like play with. But a lot of the comments are bots, right? I mean, there's just and you really have no way of knowing, but in some cases you just kind of have a spidey sense about it. It's like, that looks like a fake account. This is another fundamental problem, is the fact that you don't know, like, most people probably don't know, or maybe don't care, whether something was written by a human, thought of by a human, or whatever, whether they used AI for it, or it's just AI, just creating it from scratch. And that's it. I mean, and like, people are just engaging with this all day long, and they're in this fantasy world.
On multimedia, that like, you can't, like, all the video now can be completely invented. I mean, and like, it's not that we couldn't do fictional video before, but there was a cost. Now
there's a much higher cost.
Like, again, it turns out when things are expensive, most people, most of the time they aren't as abused, because people don't have the resources. The abusers don't have the resources. And so, which is sort of a terrible thing to think, right? Because, like, don't we want sort of democratization of access to capabilities? But maybe not always.
I'm telling you, I think there was an article written recently, I don't remember the source, but about how people are more likely interacting with bots more than regular humans, and they don't even know it, to your point, Joe, and like social media threads and things of that nature. And the funny thing is, because I do have access to social media, I'm not a poster. I don't, I maybe lurk for some family and friends, but more so than YouTube, for sure, it seems like. But when I'm on there, sometimes you'll find like some kind of a post that's going to cause a stir up of conversation, and then all you see is garbage. But it's people arguing, saying, well, you're probably a bot, but I'm going to say this. And then people are like, well, if you think it's a bot, why are you arguing with it? Like,
exactly. If you think it's a bot, go outside. Yeah.
Like, phone down, walk away, man. Yeah. And like, it's just really bad out there. Man, you think guys that's are better for not being on it at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like I said, Reddit, but I don't post much or ever. Like, I just like to read stuff there. It's like a source of sort of news, I guess. But I think so advertising is one major problem. Bots are another huge problem. And it kind of goes back to how we started the conversation, Adam, with, someone lurking on your forum and masquerading as someone, and, they're not a bot, but they're not who they say they are. And so, like,
the attack was in fact AI driven in some way.
I see.
The post that sucked this guy in, I pay a lot of attention to writing styles and whatnot. And AI writing styles are actually pretty easy to determine a lot of time. And this was classic AI writing.
Right.
So whoever it was probably not a native English speaker. And so it didn't sound anything like Glenn, but it sounded like it was well written in that kind of AI-ish, slightly repeat what you said. AIs tend to repeat themselves a lot. You may have noticed.
Totally.
And certain other little tells. So, but that requires a fair amount of experience and also just time. Like you have to read quickly enough. One that almost got me the other day. I don't know if you guys run into this. I probably should do a TCN article about it. The e-card attacks, where you get like what looks like it's like an invitation. So you get it's an envelope and like so and so is inviting you to such and such.
Yeah.
You click through and it's like wants you to log in. And you're like, oh, I don't want to log. Oh, right. Like you should not have to log in to see an invitation.
Right.
But I got one from a former Macworld editor who was compromised, and he was sufficiently embarrassed. He explained to me what he'd done wrong. It was just like, again, a conflation of perfect storm events. He was expecting something from the person, and there was an event coming up and all that. And it was the wrong time of day. He wasn't paying.
Totally.
Working
a little
quickly.
tired and
right. And so but I also do think that, again, the AIs are just getting better and better. And so the people who were going to be, we used to just say, oh, look for bad English. No one's got bad English in their spam now, unless they want it to be. Like there's no reason to have bad English in your spam. And so, and there's no reason why you can't just steal, an existing message and then edit it to make it look right. You just even tell the AI to edit it. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
So
this has been what I've been worrying about for years. I mean, I used to say, it's like bad grammar was the only thing stopping a lot of these scams for a long time.
Saving the world with bad grammar.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so if the more you pay attention to you read carefully, like the better off, you might be. And like, again, a lot of clients could be caught, it's like late at night and they're tired and one of these things slips through because they're not reading as closely. Now, I mean, like you said, there's really no reason that any of these, scams should ever use bad grammar, and that's not going to be a tell anymore. The prompt to log in and also the lack of an auto login should be a very big clue. But again, you're training clients about technical things like why, I explained to clients that the reason to use a password manager is, number one, to be able to use strong and unique passwords for everything, because that's kind of like the fundamental thing. That's where you need to start. Like you can't reuse passwords and you can't make one up, and I explain all the basics. But the other reason to use a password manager is that it will log you in automatically. It knows if you're on that website or not, and so if it doesn't autofill, like then you should pause there. But they have to remember that. They have to like keep track of this technical reason that, their tech guy told them once that they should be careful if it doesn't autofill. I mean, they're not really going to remember that in the moment in this kind of situation. Now we're transitioning to pass keys, which kind of basically do that automatically. Like a pass key will, it knows the website and it will offer to use it. So we're moving in that direction, but a lot of people are still prone to these kinds of, exploits really of their psychology.
Well, I hadn't quite put this together. I'm not sure if what I'm going to say is going to make total sense. But like when I say I don't use social media, it's not that I don't like spend a lot of time talking to people on the internet, but I do so in constrained places. TidBITS Talk, a little bit the Mac admin Slack. I'm not a big Slack user, but but Slack, like constrained places where there are only people. I also have from my running club, we have another discourse forum, things like that. So, so it's not as though you can't like interact with people online, but there is a big difference when it's a relatively constrained group and not just sort of open to everything on the internet. And and where I'm going with passkeys on that is it feels like there's something slightly different about passkeys because of the cryptography involved, where it's constraining the communications in a different way than passwords. because password, anyone can enter a password, whereas only your device can provide a passkey.
Right.
So I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a tortured analogy, but like I feel like there's something there in the commonality of not being open to everything.
Yeah, I see the analogy there. Yeah, I mean, actually, that's a really interesting point about the openness of like a standard social network. And again, it gets to the advertising model because it needs to be as open as possible to encourage, mass communication across, huge networks of people that are only loosely connected. For example, last week my wife said, "Oh, this person I went to high school with, oh, they have 2 kids now, and like da da da, and they had invited her to connect on Facebook, and it's like." Actually, you have had no contact since high school.
Right.
We're in our 40s. Like it's been like 20 something years,
You don't
30
care.
years.
Really, you don't.
Yeah. Like I know you don't care. You didn't know anything about this person for the last 25 years, and there was no downside to that. And it's like, yeah, connect, It's like, well, why? Like there's no point. Like this could be anyone. This could be a person just walked by who has 2 kids or whatever, Like it doesn't really matter that you went to high school together. That has no relevance anymore. Anyway, the point is like those reasons that people connect online are very flimsy in the first place. Like,
Right.
But if you at least have some kind of closed or unifying like way, in your case, bringing together people in TidBITS Talk or like, our Mac admin Slack community or something, it's insulated from the general public. It's a closed system. And so there's some trust maybe like inherent to that. And I think it gets at this whole bot question or, I think it's a big problem to solve like going forward. And I don't know how you do it because people can game that system too. They can pretend they're someone that
I think with Mac admins, you have to like apply, don't you? They don't just,
think
someone has to
now-
approve you.
There's a gatekeeper of some kind.
There's a gatekeeper. And that was
But
what I didn't have for Slack.
How does that work though? I mean, how can you, at some point someone is verifying someone's identity. Like I'm saying I'm this person with this company and, I'm an ACN member or not.
Passkeys, basically it's cryptography.
Interesting.
There's a little of that.
Well, I mean, and then so what's at the base level of that? It goes. I guess it's the mark of the beast, right? The chip that we're all going to have embedded that's going to prove our identity because, is it a fingerprint like on your finger, literally, or is it a government issued ID? Like, how do you?
Apple's actually done a relatively good job of that.
Okay.
In the sense of, you do tie it to a lot of stuff. The identity that you establish via your iPhone and your Apple account, is tied to a fair amount. And so like it's not perfect, obviously, and we get into all those like the age verification nonsense things.
Yep.
But I do feel as though there are things that can be done to prove you can prove you're not a bot relatively easily. The proving you're not a hacker is a different problem.
Yeah, I mean, right. Proving you're not a bot, although
a bot is not going to be able to come up with an iPhone, right? They're not going to have an ID in a secure enclave.
I think Joe's got some in one of his Reddit forums where he's not believing it.
Well, I mean, even the what's the famous example from like a year ago? That ancient history in the times of AI, where I think it was an OpenAI model or something that that engaged with like a mechanical Turk human person to like solve a CAPTCHA because the AI bot said basically like, I'm a human, I'm just blind and I can't see this, so could you please help me? And they like paid, the AI bot paid a human to solve the CAPTCHA to prove that they weren't a bot when they were. And this is part of their testing that determined this. So, I'm sure like if it happened in testing, like it can, I'm sure people are using this today to get through CAPTCHAs or just paying humans directly to just, pretend, just solve the CAPTCHA.
There is a certain level with a lot of this stuff. And this kind of gets back to the whole AI is going to take your jobs. No, AI is not going to take your jobs. People are going to get rid of your jobs. Like, let's be real. There's a person who's making that decision, not an AI. And
Well,
so
not yet. I think
yeah,
yeah.
but I mean, yeah, not maybe not. But
I mean, as soon as
you
we're
know,
out of alignment with AI, that's a whole different scale of problem, because you could have
right. But
AI
it does feel
literally
as
take your
though,
job. But
we are in the, and this is troubling to me because I've always been one of those people who's been fairly, optimistic about humanity. But
Mhm.
boy, a lot of people out there suck. It's, there's sort of that level
Yeah,
of, oh yeah, we didn't have any choice. We had to fire everyone because AI. Like, no, you had a choice.
right.
So don't do it. Like maybe you have to figure out a different way of doing things, but like it's not as simple ever as like, oh, we had to do it for because AI was so useful.
Right.
Um, like you saw the big one was at Block, and Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
Oh, we laid off all these people. Once people actually started talking, like, well, actually, they wanted to lay off people anyway. This was just an
Anyway,
excuse, right?
AI is a cover
Yeah.
for that. Yeah,
That
for
was a
sure.
cover. They
Yeah.
weren't actually good because, like, I mean, I followed the whole like AI and programmer stuff from a non-programmer standpoint relatively closely,
Mhm.
and I'm willing to believe that there are people who are doing some pretty impressive stuff, but I also think it's not nearly as widely distributed as many people think it is.
Mm.
That it is really not a situation where like, oh, well, these people are suddenly 17 times more productive, and that's why we're firing all the low level programmers.
Yeah,
You
some
know,
people will be,
some
20
will.
times more productive, and some
Yep.
people will be 2 or 3 times more productive, and
A whole
and
lot
some
will
people
spend a lot of
won't.
time dicking
Yeah.
around with tools.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like I'm arguing with AI half the time when I'm, using AI. I'm like kind of
Yeah.
arguing with it to like get it to do what I really want it to do, and it knows
Yeah.
how to. Yeah. It's a weird it's a weird tool. Yeah. I want to get into also. I mean, there's so much more to talk about with this, but in addition to solving the bot problem, which if we spent a few more minutes, maybe we'd solve it. There's also the other problem is
Squirrel.
Section 2. Yeah, Section 230 is, I think, the third kind of like like leg of the stool that is building this huge problems in our world right now, which is that these companies that have social media sites that are crowdsourced, that are the content is
Yeah.
provided by the community. They don't have to answer to anybody really because of this Section 230 protection, which got us to this point because probably a lot of these companies couldn't have possibly defended in court the content that humans produced or whatever. Maybe they wouldn't have grown as fast. Maybe that would have been a good thing. I don't know. But that to me is like the third big huge problem that we just haven't ever dealt
So
with.
we did just see some really interesting stuff. I think it was in Los Angeles where Meta and YouTube got whacked
Yeah.
by I think it was juries that basically said Section 230 is not a defense for what you're doing because you're making the algorithm that surfaces this, and
Yeah.
you control
Great
that
distinction.
algorithm. Like
As soon as
it's
they
one
went to
thing,
the algorithmic newsfeed, like
right?
they're basically curators now. So
Yeah,
that's a different thing.
and I think that changes the equation. And I was really pleased to hear that the jury's like, nope, that's different. This is
Yeah, I think
not
it
a
was all
matter
of
of
like $60 million or something like that, which for them is like
oh,
okay, wait 5 minutes. Well, we just made another 60 million, so that'll cover it. So
the precedence is the mainly useful thing.
Yeah.
exactly, good
Yeah.
point.
True.
The closest I actually come to doing social media, which is not a huge amount these days because I'm somewhat injured, but Strava, which is for
Oh
athletes to
yeah,
post
Yeah.
workouts and races and things like that. They actually were kind of interesting because they started out like normal, like all the social medias, and and I actually think it's great because I can follow a relatively small number of people who I know, and I actually care about their workouts. I don't really care about anything else. Like I just want to see
yeah.
what they're running, where they're running, what they're doing. Like, oh, that was a good workout, or a nice race,
Mhm.
or what happened there. But a while back, Strava started with a chronological feed. And then,
Mhm.
like all of them, they went to
Yeah,
we're going to put an algorithm in and show you just the ones you want. And
right.
people hated it.
Yeah.
And it was really not popular,
Hmm.
and I don't quite know what happened business wise, but the founders came back to the company, and
Hmm.
that was the first thing they did was let you switch back to the chronological feed.
Oh,
Interesting.
nice.
And
Yeah.
I don't know the stats on that, but I thought that was such a useful thing because you could then just say, I'm going to dip in. Like, I know, like, I'm going to dip in. Oh, look, I can go back to yesterday. Like, I'm not going to go back.
Right.
Like, I don't have this infinite scroll of like, I don't even know why someone's further down than further up, whatnot. This is just simple time. My head can understand time.
Right.
And I thought that was a really important move. And again, one of those things that, if you did it in other social media sites, it would be change the equation because, nothing would stick around. Right? It wouldn't, like, the algorithm pulls out, this is the thing you're going to engage with because it's a big deal, it's controversial, it's a hot take, blah blah blah. As
Right.
opposed to if it was chronological, it'd just be gone in seconds.
Yeah.
Because there's so much. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. I think that's a good, that would be a good alternative, history to go back to. Although then it occurs to me that, we have this flood the zone with crap, in our politics right now, so that there's always the new thing that's bumping the old thing, because each day there's something even crazier that's happening in the news that we seem to need to pay attention to. But actually the thing that happened, 5 days ago or 10 days ago is still really consequential, and we've already like taken our eye off the ball at that point. So
I have a personal theory, which is that you should not. I mean, like it's hard to actually put into practice, but I believe that you should not read any news that hasn't been around for 2 weeks.
Interesting.
If it didn't stick around for 2 weeks, it's not news.
Yeah,
Simple as that.
I like you said hard to put into practice, right? Like I like
we can't really do it.
But you'd also be like, oh, the world ended. When did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, I just found out my neighborhood was destroyed by a tornado 2 weeks ago. That sucks.
So this is more for like like national and
Politics
international
or
news and things
something.
like that, where like do you like, I mean, horrible stuff going on, like bombing of Iran. Like, this is going to be around for 2 weeks. Like, there's no question, right?
Yeah.
That's stuff that happened in Gaza or like those aren't flashes in the pan. But there are plenty of other things where, did you need to know that there was a flood in some place in India?
Yeah.
Horrible things. Sorry for the people who died in the flood and all the damage, et cetera, et cetera. But no, you do not need to know about every natural disaster everywhere in the world. And no, it won't be in the news in 2 weeks. Here, it will be in India because it's important there. And so, again, there's no way to really do this. My approach is I actually don't read news either. But I find that it filters in. Like if you're in the world, you're talking to people, stuff comes up. It's only very infrequently that someone says, "Hey, did you hear about such and such?" I'm like, "No, I didn't." And I'm kind of surprised because it seems like a big deal. So, so like the filtering in, I think is kind of useful. But in part of the problem, is that there's just, again, this goes back to the infinite. Like, how much do you need to know to be informed?
Yeah.
And how informed do you need to be? Will it change your actions?
Yeah.
And I think that the vast amount of what we read consume, whatever, will not change our actions in any way, shape, or form, and therefore is best avoided. So, boy, do I sound grumpy and old.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, essentially, we've given away unlimited amounts of our attention to these big companies, to news companies, or even Apple and providers,
and even great news, very well done news.
Yeah.
No, I'm not arguing quality at all.
Sure.
But just like, oh my goodness, shut it up for a bit.
Exactly. And actually, it occurs to me as you're describing this scenario, like, we should be selling our attention to them. Like, they should be, it's like, I will give you, like, I will give you like 2 urgent news alerts per day, make them count, and and like a little bit of like updates from my network of friends or something, like, and like, that's what you get. And so make them count. Like, don't just, alert me every time, I mean, I get, anyway, we've all seen it, but like, you're getting advertisements now from Apple of all people, through
I'm waiting for the Maps one.
I know
to go
that's a
live.
terrible idea. What is wrong with
So
them?
so
It's a
I so
horrendous
like I,
idea.
I'm not going to say anything until it actually happens and I see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But this feels to me like an opportunity for civil disobedience in the sense of like, oh, you have an ad? We're going to report that your business is closed.
Nice. I like that. So
How
I
many
can't wait
people
to
need to
read your
report?
piece on this. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
How many
great.
people are going to report that your business is closed? Oh, no, the door's on the other side of the building.
Right.
Just like
Move the
we're going
pin. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
flood the zone for anyone w's going to buy
Yeah,
ads.
totally.
Wow.
Kill the market, because
Kill the
no, we
market.
do not freaking need ads in maps like everything else in the world.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Apple doesn't
exactly.
need more money. Like, I'm
No.
sorry. They
No.
can stop. They have all the money.
Especially if we're already paying for Apple One or whatever, like whatever thing I'm giving Apple money to not see ads like that.
Right.
That I thought I already made that deal with them, and now they're like, well, we're going to put in some ads. It'll be fine. It's like, no, I'm already paying you. Yeah.
I mean, they already have it in the App Store, and I only avoid it in the App Store because I actually only go to the App Store basically from a link, or I go to the app, I open the App Store app and do a search for a specific thing immediately.
App. Yeah.
So like I never browse the App Store. So again, cut down on the infinite.
Yeah.
So
great
I don't know.
Well, Adam, I wanted to talk more about Apple's history. If you have a little more time, I think we'll pivot to
something a little bit more fun.
Right on. Well, good advice you've given us here in part one. I think it's really, really interesting to think about all this stuff as it's happening. I mean, the world is moving so fast, and it's just hard to get oriented to it. So we really appreciate you bringing that like clear thinking to this crazy world that we're in. So
Truly.
That was part one, and we encourage everyone to listen to part two with Adam Engst, where we'll talk more about the history of Apple's 50 years as a company. And Adam has been there since close to the beginning. So join us for part two. And there's Jerry's edit point, and now we'll go into part two. Welcome back to Command Control Power, Adam Engst of TidBITS. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. We just finished speaking with you about all of the crazy stuff that's going on in the world right now in terms of advertising and AI and social media, and how to like hold the thread as a society, I think is how I would sum up our part one conversation. And for part two, maybe we'll just get into the back to basics about Apple and their 50 years. And you've been there since not year one. You're not old enough for that, but close to it, I guess.
Literally 36 years as of today.
As of today. Amazing.
Actually, I can remember, is it the 15th or the 16th? I can't remember. April 15th or 16th, 1990 is when TidBITS started. So 36 years.
Very
crazy.
cool.
That's like an anniversary day. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I have to write something too. Do you know how hard it is to write something 36 times?
Well, I thought that was an interesting thing in your take on, your piece on TidBITS, what Apple's 50th anniversary misses. I pulled some quotes from this that I love to quote people. I love to quote yourself to you. I don't know. What am I trying to say? I love to quote people to themselves. So I thought this was an interesting take because this reminded me of myself, where a lot of people have asked me, and these are like, my aunt or like relatives, who know a little bit about technology, but really don't know anything, but know that I'm like the Apple guy. And they always say, oh, did you read Steve Jobs, book, or did you read this? And I'm really not in the loop on a lot of this stuff. And I don't have the same like engagement with, these anniversaries, these meaningful book releases and things like that. And the way you kind of introduced the piece, you mentioned that as much as you adore much of this technology, you say, I'm not sure that it has made the world a better place overall. By the way, see part one of the conversation. We were undoubtedly naive, but there was a distinct belief that the technological advances would improve the human condition. That has undoubtedly happened in many places and situations, but I remain deeply troubled by the direct and indirect societal ills caused by the tech giants. Again, see part one. Do you want to expand on some of this and how it's kind of colored your like reflections of Apple's 50 years?
Yeah. I mean, go back to way the beginning. When we started TidBITS, there was a huge sense that, one, this technology was super cool and we wanted to tell people about it. But it was also important, like it was an important work. like conveying this information, getting it out there. This is a time when there was, like, keep in mind, this is before the internet was a really big thing. This is 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you got information was in magazines.
Right.
And, there were the monthlies, Mac User and Mac World, and all the various PC magazines. And then there were the weeklies. So Mac World was obviously the main one for most of us. PC Week, PC World, or sorry, Info World were the other two. But even with them, you had there was a fairly significant lag time between something becoming known and it coming out in the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And probably most people didn't realize that, because how else were you going to find out, right?
Yeah,
you didn't know that you weren't
that's the way it worked. That's the way it worked.
That's the
There
way it
was
worked.
this natural human level pacing of information distribution, right?
And then, but what Tanya and I sort of realized was that if you went electronic with the stuff that was in the weekly magazines, people could learn about it well before it came out in the monthly magazines, if it ever did. Because the monthly magazines didn't really do news stuff so much. They really were more into reviews and product stuff and how-tos and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really felt like trying to help people do a better job, because part of it was also a little bit back then, you really cared about learning what was going to happen because it colored your purchasing decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff moved slowly enough that if something was going to change in a week because some new thing was coming out, you wanted to wait that week because it was going to make a difference for your next year. Like you couldn't just like, oh, it'll be better again 2 weeks later. Nowadays it feels like you're less buying into platforms or workflows or things like the purchases. Well, everything was more expensive, right? The hardware was pretty expensive and the software was hundreds of dollars. So you really cared what you were spending your money on. And so I said I felt like we were really doing important work in that at that time and that place. And then similarly, when I wrote the Internet Starter Kit for Macintosh in 1993, it was about helping people in this huge way where you could get online and be exposed to other ideas, be exposed to people who thought like you or didn't think like you. I mean, both being important. One of the good things about the internet is being able to form into small communities that you would never be able to if you live in Boise, Idaho, for instance. There's not enough people in Boise, Idaho who think like you, but if you can talk to people all over the world, you can find those things. So all this seemed just really, really good. And so it really took a while before we started to see the down things. Do you remember Flame Wars? And when
I remember the name, I don't remember how did that happen?
You'd be on a mailing list or a Usenet news group,
right?
And people would have these huge arguments, and there would you'd be quoting some text, and you'd write your 3 paragraphs of rebuttal to that text, and you'd quote another line, you write your 3 paragraphs of rebuttal.
Yeah,
Flame Wars took a lot of time, man. But
I used to have clients I would engage with like that, but we parted ways.
but I mean, in some ways, think about it. I mean, as annoying as they were, and Eudora, my favorite email client of all time, at some point even added the chili pepper rating, where it analyzed what you had written to see if there were inflammatory words, and you get 1, 2, or 3 chili peppers if you were likely to start flaming.
Smart.
But
we need that now.
But doesn't that seem quaint?
Right. Yeah,
I know, right?
You can have a big argument with huge amounts of text, as opposed to just the vitriol and cesspool nature of Twitter and Facebook and all those places. Come on, it'd be nice if we got a good old flame war. But I said it really felt like a perhaps naive, but certainly a time when people thought we were improving the world in a big way. I mean, I was never quite in that community, but like, John Perry Barlow and the Declaration of Independence for cyberspace denizens or whatever it was called, I forget exactly, where they were like, the internet is a different place and things don't really apply here. And, we really, that how it really felt like there was something new and exciting happening. And, all of these other, social and government structures just weren't up to it. That they like we didn't want regulation because the government totally didn't understand it. Remember the Alaska senator was like, it's about the intertubes.
Yeah. It's a series of tubes. Yeah,
it's a series of tubes.
Yeah,
and simultaneously, like, Al Gore ends up being mocked mercilessly.
Yeah,
when he in fact did exactly what he said he did. I mean, like, he was instrumental in funding the early ARPANET stuff. That he should have been lionized, not mocked for this stuff.
Right.
And so in any event, and I think Apple, to bring it back a little bit more too, Apple really had that, that kind of, we are changing the world. Steve Jobs, do you want to sell sugar water? Or do you want to change the world? That was what Apple really, had at its core basis at that time. And I think early on, particularly, that really was probably true. Later on, I think it becomes a little bit of a marketing point, where, so in the sad news, a guy named John Martellaro just died. He was a columnist for Mac Observer for many years. And I was writing this up, and I was searching through my mail from him, and I had actually exchanged some mail with him, not a lot, but over the years. And I discovered, which I'd forgotten even when I exchanged the mail with him in 2009, I'd forgotten this, that in 1996 he had actually written an article for TidBITS, which is on our archive, and I go and read it, in which he's basically saying, "Oh, Apple, we in the community, we have all these ideals around Apple and 1996, and now they're just doing price cutting." Like that's the Performa era, right?
Wow.
When it was the 17 zillion models, each unique for a reseller. The compatibility was, the quality was crap. The compatibility was all over the place. They were terrible, terrible machines, and confusing as all get out. But it was like, wow, even in 1996, we're sort of saying the same thing, that like there's this idealism at the heart of Apple, which I think Apple started with. But subsequently, I think it's something that we are mostly applying to Apple. That it's something that we see in Apple, even when it's maybe not there. And I mean, because Apple now, I mean, again, probably best of the bunch, don't get me wrong, but they're a big business. I mean, they're a really, really big business. There's all sorts of ugly, nasty, horrible stuff that goes on inside Apple because of Apple, et cetera, et cetera. You don't get to be the size of Apple without there being ugly, nasty, horrible stuff.
Yeah, or even get to stay that size.
Stay that way, right.
Without, allowing for some amount of that. I mean, appeasing a dictator is a recent example. It's like negotiating
working conditions in China
terrorists.
with Muslim minorities.
Exactly. Right. Huge societal issues that we really wish that they would do better. And yet, to your point, like, I still think of, like, I'm rooting for them as the underdog still, like, and they're a multi-trillion dollar company. Like, they're clearly not the underdog. They've won. Like, so, and yet I find myself cheering them on as an underdog, because that's just the kind of, like, baggage that I bring in from, being a fan of theirs back in the 90s. But you're giving an example of the cynicism even of that era, like, where people were like, they're already, like, they already jumped the shark, lost the plot. Yeah.
And so, so again, this is kind of where I was going with my article about how the celebrations sort of missed the point a little bit. It feels to me like, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, the distillation of what was great about Apple in some ways was the community. That it was people who took those ideals and put them into place around Apple, using Apple technologies,
Right.
and all that. I mean, do you guys remember Guy Kawasaki's Evangelist?
Yeah.
With the mailing list where I was like,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
the problem, go after that company and get them to fix it. And then people would like write en masse to that company and flood them with comments, things like that. There was just this belief that like you really were changing the world and for the better.
Yeah.
And if you kind of bought into all of this thing, but what I feel is that where that really survived and where it was sort of most true was in the community.
Yeah.
And the internet frankly killed a lot of that. Apple never really did too much for the community. It was always a little bit like, yeah, we don't really know what you're all about. And plus you're guaranteed. Like, you're loyal customers. We don't have to win you back.
We don't have to win you over. Yeah, exactly.
You're going to buy everything we make sight unseen.
Totally.
So, so I think that's a little bit of it. I mean, probably the thing that Apple, the most significant thing that Apple did to hurt the community, which I understand, I don't really fault them in some ways, is they killed Macworld.
Yeah.
Right. That Macworld. I think it went on for a couple of years without Apple keynotes. But when Macworld was the place where Apple released new stuff, and you could bring tens of thousands of people together to do that, that was that had a huge amount of it was a huge foundation for communities to build. And once Apple said, nah, no more keynotes, because, again, to be fair, that put them on a schedule they didn't control.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. And it was sort of a stupid schedule, too, if you think about it. I mean, January? Who announces stuff in January? It's a terrible time. You want stuff announcing stuff in like the fall so you can sell it at Christmas. January and July? Terrible idea. And the only reason why Macworld was then is because that was when they could get Moscone and the Javits Center in New York, or Bayside and World Trade in Boston. When Macworld started, they didn't have a lot of pull to be able to get the good dates. So they were settling for bad dates early on, and then it just kind of got into. I don't know all the details there, although I know who to ask. But it is one of those situations where I know that when you have big events, it's very hard to move them significantly in the calendar. They did once. I think they tried to have a Macworld in April once, and I think it was a real problem.
Interesting.
So
I mean, we've certainly seen that in our years, where it used to be that Apple would give us discounts on hardware, and they had programs where we could give our clients discounts on hardware. And I remember having the same observation. This goes back decades now already, where we would tell our clients, like, they don't really need our help to sell their products. Like you're buying them anyway. We're buying them anyway. Like, they don't need to sort of like coddle us as this like, really important community around Apple anymore, because they just had their momentum. And so I think you make a good point that is a turning point where, they're not fostering the community of people as much anymore. And they're just a big
Apple is
now.
a great believer in not invented here. Like, if Apple doesn't do it, it's not good. And obviously, to a great extent, that has always been not as much possible as it gets, throughout history. Like, Apple takes more and more control over everything. I mean, look at Apple Silicon, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing because Apple took it over.
I'm so glad they did, right?
Right.
I mean, it's
Screw
a
this
great
Intel
example
nonsense.
of vertical integration. Yeah.
But same thing, forget this Macworld keynotes. We can do a better keynote on our own.
Right.
Well, and they did, and they could show much more stuff. They had much more control over it. They were longer. They were more detailed. Like, you could not do that at Macworld. And some, like with not so much consultants, but resellers. There've always been people in Apple who've been in favor of independent resellers, but they've more or less lost. That Apple's like, we can have our own stores, right? we can sell a whole lot more if we do it ourselves. And then we don't have a middleman. Then we make 20% or 50% more. Like, this is a really smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Win-win, except for then you don't have small stores in communities that become gathering spots, and et cetera, et cetera. User groups go away. I mean, user groups, the internet damaged a lot of user groups primarily. But I mean, user groups, Boston Computer Society and BMUG, Berkeley Mac User Group, they had tens of thousands of members.
Amazing.
I mean, just insane. The BMUG newsletters were this thick.
Wow.
Wow.
They were quarterly and they were an inch thick. And and everywhere had a big thriving Mac user group. Now we're down to, they just keep dropping. The only one that's doing really well is the Naples Mac Friends user group
I
in
think I
Naples,
read this
Florida.
on your site. Yeah, pretty impressive.
They're for I don't want to say this bad way, for a bunch of retired people, man, did they figure out how to use the internet. They really understood how to do this, and so they have done a fabulous job of using the electronic tools to build a community where most user groups really never managed to survive people not gathering in person.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's it's looking back, you can trace it all, and I don't feel as though anyone, including Apple, really did anything wrong. Like it was never we'll get rid of those user groups and then life will be good. There was no evil villain here. It was a whole lot of decisions, the world changing, the world evolving, Apple becoming more capable in a lot of ways as a company, and not needing when you're little, you need friends. When you're big, you don't need so many friends.
I mean, to your point, every one of their decisions are massive. I mean, with pulling out of Macworld, they didn't kill Macworld themselves, but they did by pulling out. It's one of those things where their decisions I was just watching the BlackBerry movie, which is a great movie, by the way, the other day, and just seeing their history, and then seeing how 2007 iPhone gets released is a bye-bye BlackBerry, just like just in a matter of moments. And that decision to make the phone, which was amazing, and it is what it is now, killed a company.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
And a company and a product which people adored. I mean, they called them crackberries, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, was that a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, I don't watch it regularly, but I'm several seasons behind because I really don't watch it regularly. But I find the For All Mankind TV show on Apple TV fascinating because of the way it deals with very reasonable alternative histories.
Yeah.
This history just depends on this one little thing, and then we go in this other direction, and suddenly, we've got people on the moon using 1980s technology. Like, wow,
great show.
Yeah, and so I found it frankly a little too stressful on some of the drama stuff, but I was really intrigued by the alternative history approaches that they took, because I could often see, that was merely a path not taken. A person who is assassinated or didn't get elected or whatever, suddenly that, these relatively small things change huge bits in the story anyway, of course. But you can see how, here's a big one. Do you remember when Steve Jobs comes back, Apple's on its last legs, and he manages to convince Microsoft to invest $150 million?
Yeah.
Like that. And Bill Gates shows up at Macworld Boston via video link.
Yep.
That was wild. Yeah.
And, right. And that was a huge, huge deal. And Microsoft made out like bandits on that stock. I mean, don't get me wrong. This was not Microsoft wasn't tossing anyone a bone exactly, but there was a whole lot of luck. And, this is Steve Jobs. He may have been a thoroughly flawed human being, but man, was he persuasive. And, he made that happen, and it bought Apple the time they needed to move forward and come out with the iMac, which, again, basically saved the company.
Yeah. Amazing.
So, the number of times, I mean, that was why part of why we love Apple so much is that for so long Apple needed us, or at least we thought they needed us, each individually.
Right.
Because I mean, it was news at 11. Apple, beleaguered Apple computer.
Beleaguered. I remember that term being applied to them. It's been a long time. Wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
beleaguered
funny.
Apple computer. I mean, who was it? Michael Dell was talking about maybe I'll buy Apple and sell them for parts, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That was the other one. So insulting. We were like,
And where's Dell? No, well, that's Dell.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. See, we were rooting for that we were rooting for Apple all that time, and like we were vindicated with their, with their success, and they're kind of like, who are you again? So it's kind of
and there is some of that I think the company, like, they're pretty good actually at like thanking employees.
Sure.
But I do not believe, and they'll sort of thank customers sometimes. But I don't really think Apple has done a great job of acknowledging community. And by that, I mean publications in part, press, groups, the user groups, and frankly, certain people, not trying to toot my own horn in any way, shape, or form, but like, this is what I've done for 36 years.
Totally.
And that doesn't just happen. I mean, like, there's a ton of people who were the Apple correspondent, the Macintosh correspondent, or the Apple correspondent for major publications for a few years.
Yeah.
Where are they now? Like, they moved on. Like, that wasn't their thing. That was just their job. And there's a lot of people sort of like me, or John Martellaro, or the other guy who died very just recently, Chuck Laternos, who also wrote for Mac Observer and played in the Macworld All-Star Band.
Wow.
There was a band of industry Mac writers.
Wow.
And they were pretty damn good.
Nice.
Writers, and Paul Kent, who was the general manager of Macworld Expo. And he actually had another band too, the Silicon Valley House Rockers, who were fabulous. But any event, like, this is the kind of thing, is like, you'd have these parties where all the people whose writing you would read would be up on stage playing really pretty good rock and roll.
Nice.
And
That's awesome.
and so like, the people who did that were like, I hate to use this term, but they were more important to the community. They were the people who made the community. They went back out from Macworld and assembled communities wherever they were, and that, I believe, did get Apple through a lot of these bad times. There was always that support. The people who were going to buy everything, and they were going to make sure their company or their university, was at least, fighting. There was someone in there fighting for Apple products to be used, and making sure that the Windows people didn't just take over. Right. And that's something which I believe Apple didn't acknowledge enough then, and doesn't acknowledge enough now. And I mean, and now, it's probably not that important, because it's 2 billion iPhones out there. There's no community around the iPhone. There just isn't. So,
that's interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, and the other side of that, and I can't quite remember when I started getting snarky about this. The Mac had always been something you created with.
Yeah.
Right. It was a tool.
That was the hook for me. I mentioned recently about HyperCard, and even just like being able to.
I'm really excited on that one.
Yeah, really.
And I think it was using HyperCard where you could go in and just like create a script and have it talk, like same as you can do on the command line. Say my teacher sucks or whatever, and so it's like you could do that,
funny.
and
so funny
it was hilarious, believe me. Yeah, it was hilarious. But like the idea that you could, like you said, create with it, it was not a tool for consumption, or not strictly just for consumption. Sure,
it wasn't
an educational
really much to
tool.
consume.
I mean, there were like CDs, and that
Well,
would be like
that's even a little
some.
later. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
quite. I mean, like I knew a friend of mine, a guy named Chad Magendans was the product manager for Microsoft Encarta, their
Hmm.
encyclopedia.
Right.
And so we knew the
Okay.
people at Microsoft who did some of those CDs. Chad
Amazing.
went on to write disk wrap,
Hmm.
it was one of the early disk image utilities, and
Okay.
things like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
anyway, the point being
No,
that,
but that's a great
right,
point. In the early days, you didn't have an internet connection, you didn't have a bunch of software, you didn't have like tools to learn, you didn't have Encarta or any, Encyclopedia Britannica or anything like that sitting there on a disk waiting to be like
some
consumed.
games.
You open up a word processor and you
Yep.
wrote, or you like used a HyperCard, used
Yeah.
HyperCard to create a game yourself,
And so at some point, and I mean, there was some, there was email, obviously, there were bulletin boards,
Sure.
some of that kind of stuff. But at some point, I remember being a little snarky, and this might have been early 2000s, when iChat came out.
Hmm.
And I remember being kind of annoyed because it felt like we're seeing a shift from something that you use to create things or to make things or whatnot, to something that was purely a communications machine, or
Hmm.
more primarily for communications, that people were getting this for
Interesting.
other reasons.
Yeah.
And obviously by then the web had become more of a thing, and all that as
Right.
well. And but this is, and then of course the iPod appears. And so where the Mac had always been, I don't quite want to use the term wrong, but like it'd been serious,
Yeah.
like it wasn't frivolous.
Hmm.
You might have fun with a Mac, you might even play games on a Mac, but it wasn't frivolous.
Hmm.
And the when you got to the iPod, no, talking about iPod. Oh, I love the iPod. There's nothing wrong with the iPod. It was, like listening to music.
Hmm.
And then certainly the iPhone and the iPad, that tenor changed,
Mm.
where these were not serious things. They might be super cool, but they weren't
Yeah.
serious. They were for entertainment or goofing off, or
Mm.
they weren't for doing cool stuff
Right.
like the Mac had been, and still
Interesting.
is for many of us.
Yeah.
But that is, and again, not complaining about the technology, but I really, and the world had moved on. The world had changed such that we were really more into communication, and then
Hmm.
later, at least communication was bidirectional, usually between people,
Right.
or always between people, small numbers of people,
Yeah.
and then we got into content consumption,
Hmm.
where it was usually one way. It was unidirectional. You're just consuming what comes out of that. And it might be people, but it often wasn't. And
Hmm.
and then and now they're influencers who aren't really people either. So
It's interesting, I keep thinking in my head the quote, the famous Steve Jobs quote of the computer is a bicycle for the mind, and
yeah,
I think the way he intended it was that, like a human. What's the backstory of that? It's like a human who, the fastest runner,
yeah,
can't outrun a cheetah, but a human with a bicycle is much faster. And so the idea is like it's a tool in that sense. It's an enhancement to our natural ability, and so it's a bicycle for the mind is a way of like it's a tool for the mind that it enhances and extends the ability of the human mind. But a bicycle is also fun, right? So
yes,
so
yes.
actually, like, it kind of works on that level too.
Hey, you want to
And
go ride
now,
bikes?
yeah, exactly. Like exercising our mind, or just, but the content consumption like era of technology is largely what we were criticizing in part one of this conversation, where, people are just wrapped up in these, like, even the arguments they're having online is not creating content. It's really just like kind of spinning their gears and consuming, a post that gets them annoyed or gets them excited or whatever. We're kind of coming full circle to, like, now with Claude Code or AI
Mm.
coding tools in general. We're able to now create once again, like
Oh,
with the sky is the limit, not just writing a blog, but like you can create an app, and Apple owns that as well. So it's kind of maybe an interesting
well,
full
I
circle
actually
moment.
No, I think this is actually huge. I mean, keeping in mind that it's all changing super fast, and I acknowledge all of the ethical issues with how it was trained and blah 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 blah. I think this
Sure.
AI stuff is truly truly fascinating,
Yeah.
and from my perspective, I find this as like the research assistant I never had who responds
Yeah.
instantly.
Totally.
Um,
Yep.
and I mean, there's time, and possibly my most common phrase to ChatGPT, which I don't do all that often, but it's just like I do it repeatedly, is confirm with a search,
Mm.
Yeah.
because it'll respond with the model. I'm like, that sounds, I'm not sure. Confirm with a search.
Right.
And then most of the time it's not like, oh, I was completely wrong, but it will back off on something or whatever once it actually goes out to do that. So like on the one hand, just like being able to learn more about a topic. And I think that's really important. And then the other one, as you say, is building tools. I haven't had so much fun since HyperCard, building a couple of little things with AI. I've built a stopwatch that works exactly the way I want it to as a native iPhone app.
Nice.
For backup race timing, to replace 1970s printing stopwatches, Seiko stopwatches, which are stupid expensive and expensive even to repair. And I've built a website which I can give to. I coach track workouts, and so I give them a URL, and they follow the URL, and it asks them they need to set up what their recent race time was and how much they're running per week, and then the workout is tailored to them based on that information.
Wow.
It's all stuff you can. I mean, you can look it up in the book. The Jack Daniel's running formula and all that, like tables and like you can find all the tables. My app does that.
Nice.
And it customizes it for the workout that I have set. So you're running, 200, 400, 600, 800. This is what your split times are going to be. And, Tanya's are different from the next person's. And, she writes them on her hand. But like, you don't have to look things up in a chart. The app just tells you. It's like, that's super cool. I've done another app. You're going to catch a theme here. When you're running track races, longer distance track races, the goal is to hit even pace. So you want every lap to be the same.
Okay. Makes sense.
And so if this is hard to do, you get tired. You start off excited, but you really get tired. And so if you have someone who is telling you what your lap splits are, you can't calculate them. I mean, like you're 6 laps into the mile, and there's some numbers up there on a clock. I don't know. I can't divide that by 6, particularly if you got some of them wrong. Like you might memorize what they're supposed to be or write them on your hand, but you get 1 or 2 wrong. All those numbers are wrong, are out of sync now.
Yeah.
And so you have someone who's like, you need to run, 39s, 39-second 200-meter laps, 39, 40, 39, and this app makes that super easy. It keeps track of them. It displays whether the runner is ahead of pace, behind pace, on pace. Like that's a web app.
Very cool.
It's really is it a big deal? Am I ever going to get rich doing this? No, but it's a tool that I wanted for my runners, and I can make with AI, which I could not have done otherwise.
That's very interesting.
39 for 200 meters on a distance run. That's pretty good, man. I'm just saying.
Sam's a runner too, so he would know.
Yeah. So where this came from was, in fact, when I ran my 2-mile PR long time ago, in my 40s, I had a friend who did this for me. He actually did the stopwatch, because the hard part is like you need to actually reset every time, so you're getting the split. You're getting just the lap time. He says 37, 37, and I was running. That was my thing. Was I needed to run 37s, 37s and 38s,
Sweet.
and so that was like, it's so hard. I mean, your brain shuts down, and so to be able to have something that made that possible for someone who was not an experienced stopwatch and coach type person to be able to do was really fun. And I watched a really good runner. We have this one guy locally who's super fast, and he's running a 5,000 outdoors, which 5,000 is it's a 400-meter track. You have to start on the other side of the track because
Right.
it's 12 laps to the 4,800, and then you need another 200 meters. And so that's the other problem is like, where do you read the splits? You do it on the far side of the track. You do about, and if you're a runner, you're seeing the time. The first split's just weird because it's a 200-meter split, and then how do you calculate all the rest? It's maddening. And plus, it's 5,000 meters on a track. It's a stupid race. You should really not be running that many laps on a track because it causes brain damage. But anyway, it's like I'm watching this, going, he's not going to hit his time, and he didn't, and I could see why, because he just got lost in the middle. And then he made up for a huge amount of it with a great kick. But, I was like, Alexander, you could have done this so much better if you hadn't gotten, sucked into the slow pace behind these other two guys, early on. You were not running the splits you needed to run. And we couldn't tell him that he wasn't running them, because even we couldn't do the math of subtracting the first 200 on lap 4. You run. Right. So anyway. Details irrelevant. The point is that this is something that I would have made in HyperCard in the day, and I'm making with AI now.
I will say that, on that piece of AI and leveraging Xcode and things like that, the creation part that you guys have been discussing up until this point in time, I'm actually excited about that for my own benefit now, in just leveraging what AI can offer to help me build something. Yeah. And using Xcode on the Mac to help finish that creation. And I'm more excited than ever, because I never considered myself someone that could do that sort of thing. I was I'll get someone that writes apps to do that, Mm-hmm. But, I was actually internally telling Joe and Jerry I wanted to find someone, but I'm more and more thinking maybe I can actually do this.
That's the way to go.
I was chatting with a friend who he's a Mac podcaster type, but he has a day job in insurance, and his company asked him to be basically the product manager for some app they wanted developed, because you're the tech guy, why don't you go off and do this? And this was like a year or two ago, so he had to go find developers and all that, and he is a tech guy, but he's not a product manager, or a software. He's not a developer at all, and we said that was, he hit all the standard things, we actually wanted to do X, Y, and Z. You didn't tell us about Z before, and now we have to change it, going back and forth with the developers. And what he was saying, that if he was doing that now, he would mock it up completely himself in AI. Totally, functions, probably not the actual, he wouldn't stress too much about the UI. Making it beautiful, but because that turns out to be kind of hard to do in AI. My experience is it's not very good at it's very good at readable, but it's not very good at wow, that's a pretty interface. But we were saying that he would probably try to do it that way himself, and then hand that code off to an actual developer, because
make something where viable
okay,
product, and then here it is fully functional, but now make it proper, write it,
make it proper,
code,
make sure it's secure, make sure it's you're a developer who understands this stuff, and I'm not now trying to brain dump all this stuff into you. I'm just giving you what I really want.
Show versus tell.
Right.
Interesting.
Avoid the game of telephone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as we wrap up here, Adam, it's been amazing talking to you as always, and I wanted to quote yourself back to you one more time here. This is a more inspirational quote that kind of works with. A lot of our listeners could surely relate to this and would understand this came from you based on everything you just said. But you said, I got into technology because I love explaining how things work and seeing people's eyes light up when I show them what's possible or solve a problem they couldn't figure out. That's what we all do. I mean, that's what all of our listeners do, and that's what excites us, I think. You also quoted Alan Kay, his advice, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And you give some examples of how you did that. And clearly, three that just came up, spur of the moment, were apps you've made. This is how you started TidBITS back in the day, how you wrote the fifth book, the book number 5 about the internet. That's just kind of really impressive to me.
Can't pull it down to the bottom of the stack.
Nice. But that is really, really cool. And I'm curious if Apple ever gave you any feedback about that book. Because it was specifically for the Mac, right? Oh, really?
I got
Okay. That's
I got a lawyer
that's a
letter.
interesting
Wow.
response from them.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, yeah, Apple's still a company. So
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so Internet Starter Kit for Macintosh, the very first edition. This is back when books had discs, and this was a
Mhm.
big deal because you had to get software because again, this is
Sure.
before the internet, kind of by definition.
Right.
And so I had this editor named Karen Whitehouse, who
Mhm.
she was great. I don't know how she did it. She got stuff. She was an
Mhm.
acquisitions editor, literally at Hayden, and she
Mhm.
said to me, "What do you want for your book, for your
Mhm.
disc?" And I was like, "Oh, well, we need, we need Eudora and Anarchy and a couple of
Hmm.
facts. I'm trying to remember now. It's so long ago.
Amazing. This is
Which
like bootstrapping someone's online experience. You couldn't just say, go
precisely.
to this website and download this stuff. You needed to send them the software that
We
they
gave
would use to get online. That's really
And there were two
amazing.
pieces that were
Wow.
particularly important.
Mhm.
You needed the TCP stack. That
Right.
came in a piece of software called Mac TCP, and Apple sold
Right.
that. And you
Wow.
needed something called a PPP implementation.
Okay.
I'm not gonna remember what it calls. So something rather.
PPPoE. Yeah.
No, PPP.
Oh,
It was SLIP, Serial Line Internet Protocol, and then PPP. I'm blanking on. Man, this is terrible.
Mm.
But anyway, that was what dialed. It made the connection.
Right.
And so we were able to get SLIP, I think it was, for the first one. Again, having trouble with my chronology in my head. But Mac TCP from Apple was only available as well. You could get it as a standalone product for $60, but it wasn't clear how you did that exactly. Because remember, there are no Apple stores. The way you
Right.
buy software at this point is you buy it from a catalog like Mac Warehouse.
Right.
Who had the woman with the phone, and
Oh,
she
yeah.
had a dog.
Yeah. That's right.
Any event, the Mac Connection too. Mac Connection
Yeah,
had
Mac
had
Connection.
raccoons. Yeah, I like them a little better. But any event, you might have been able to buy Mac TCP from them. I'm not 100% certain, but it was $60. The way most people got it was a university or a business. Most of the universities would site license it, so they'd pay Apple $5,000 and just be able to give it to all students. And so Karen Whitehouse goes to Apple and she says, I'd like a license for Mac TCP. And they say, sure, here's, it's $5,000. And she comes back to me and she says, this is really expensive. Do you really need this? And I'm like, yeah, we do. If we can get it, let's do that. But and so $5,000. I mean, I don't think we paid anything for anything else. I mean, like everything else was like, great, it'd be wonderful if people use my software.
Right.
And so book comes out in September, and in December, it's been out. It's selling like you would not believe, because this is the complete package.
When you say the Internet Starter Kit for Macintosh, that's not like that. That's not blowing smoke. It literally was a kit that would help you get on the internet if you're a Macintosh
It was a
user.
600-page book that explained
Wow.
all the software that you had on the disk.
And the
And the
exactly,
disc-
and it included the disk.
And even better than that, I went to my ISP, my internet service provider in Seattle, and I said, I want to get an account that I can bundle with the book, like everyone, everyone can call. And and this book is going to be, nationwide, if not international. And so, like, I'm assuming you don't want to do this, but do you know anyone who might? And my friend Ed Morin said, that's a problem we would like to have. And so he did the first for us, because I was like, we want to make this cheap. We don't, we want to make this so that it's, it's not, because at the time everything was charged by the minute, literally by the minute. And so you racked up hella bills, on top of your long distance phone calls usually. This is, MCI and Sprint era. So we have the disk with all the software on it, including Mac TCP, which you had to pay Apple $60 to get otherher.
Right.
We had the first flat rate internet account. It's $29.99 for all you could eat. Via the modems. And we had my 600 pages of. It was probably 400 pages. Hayden wanted it to be a big book, so we had some big appendixes. But nonetheless, we had the book that explained in detail how to set all this stuff up across, again, multiple packages and all this, like, because that was the whole point.
Sure.
And so, yes, it really, really was a kit. And in the first 3 months, we sold 20,000 copies.
Nice.
Because every ISP in the country said, oh, well, that's how all our Mac users will get online now. And they would sell it for us or tell people to go buy it. And and they would say, "Oh, don't use that one don't use the account on the disk with that comes to the book.
Use everything else, but then use our
But
account."
it forced everyone to move away from per minute charges to flat rate too. So that suddenly became the thing.
Interesting.
We had people calling Northwest Nexus. That was the ISP calling from Japan.
Wow.
Because international phone calls were cheaper than internet access in Japan.
In Japan.
Holy crow.
That's wild.
So it was absolutely insane. So in any event, December rolls around. I remember it was December because Macworld's coming up in January, right? And I get this letter from Apple, which says, in essence, we didn't, you have the wrong sort of license for Mac TCP.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, that's meant to be a site license and not a product license or whatnot. And I'm like, Apple legal. Like, they're gonna take my house. Hayden wasn't too. I mean, like, it was Hayden's problem, not mine in some ways. But I was keep in mind, I was 93. I was like, 25, 26. I was not old. So like I was scared silly. But it's right before Christmas break, so everything shuts down. Hayden's like, don't stress, we will deal with this, but I'm still stressing. I go to Macworld Expo, and the very first day I met this guy named Gary Hornbuckle, who was the product manager for Mac TCP. And he introduced himself. I got exchanged some email with him. I knew him slightly, so we introduced ourselves in person. And I said, "Oh, I got this letter from Apple Legal," and he's like, he said, "Ignore it. I will make it go away. Wow. We love you. You have sold more copies of Mac TCP in the last 3 months than we ever have."
Whoa, that's amazing! Wow.
Because no one buys Mac TCP.
No one even knows they need
licenses,
that.
maybe, but no, from individual copies, we sold them all. And so he was in love with us. Like, his product suddenly got into 20,000 people's hands because of this book, which and they weren't really making any money on the digital sales at all. Like, no one bought it. So that was my first Apple legal. I guess my only Apple legal experience, but yes, I was very scared.
Well, let's hope so.
He made it go away.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I had no idea there was that much to unpack about the Internet Starter Kit. It's very, very cool. Yeah.
Lots of great stories.
Yeah, totally. Well, and we didn't even get into how you came up with the first advertising on the internet. That's also an insanely cool claim to fame or infamy, as the case may be.
I'm not proud of that one anymore.
Yeah. No, it was like
PBS. I swear, it was meant to be like NPR and PBS.
Yeah, exactly. That would work. But well, in the scope of the best way to predict the future is to invent it, what are you hoping, as we wrap up here, that we invent? What kind of future are you hoping we'll invent here?
That's a tough one.
Don't ask me that.
I like to say, that I try to be persuasive in what I write, in the sense of, like, I believe I'm right. I believe I have good things to say, and I think you should listen to me. But so I try to be persuasive. But realistically, at this point, the problem is that my audience is, well, in the scheme of things, small and shrinking, right? I don't have 2 million followers on TikTok, or YouTube and all that kind of nonsense. And my audience has been with me for a very long time. Internet Starter Kit came out in 1993. Helped with the TidBITS subscriptions a great deal, because that was the information on how to subscribe to a mailing list. So like every reader of the book subscribed to TidBITS. And so the point is, my audience is older than I am. And as I said, shrinking through attrition, if nothing else. So like I wish that I had more of a little bit more of a bully pulpit,
Mhm.
and more so that I wish that I could better model this. You know, when I say I don't use social media, I don't read the headlines, you know, obsessively, you know, I
Mhm.
like all this kind of stuff, while simultaneously I spend a lot of time in Tidbits Talk helping people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the president of the Finger Electronics Club, and that forum is super active, and you know, helping runners connect with each other in the online world and the offline world. You
Mhm.
know, so like
Yeah.
I I don't I don't have any solutions to this now because I'm
Yeah.
feeling kind of small and old compared to what I did when I was 25. But it does like that's what I would like to be able to say is like, look, you can live a better life. You do
Yeah.
like it's like ditch Facebook, ditch TikTok, ditch Twitter. You know, like just
Yes.
don't go outside, talk to people,
Yeah.
exercise, be in nature. You know, and again, I understand this. That's something of a little bit of a privileged approach, but really, it is possible. It is.
Yeah.
I am a tremendously busy person who doesn't do any of those things. Partly, I don't do them because I don't have time. Like, right?
Right.
There's so much you can do. I'm busy writing stuff and developing little AI apps, and you know, and spending time at workouts, and you
Mhm.
know, and that's like what I would like to be the moral of the story. And I said I just wish I could do a better job of evangelizing that.
That.
I
Yeah.
feel that I'm somewhat talking to the converted in my audience,
Sure.
and you know, the TikTokers are not listening to me, so, and they
Yeah.
wouldn't
No.
anyway.
Yeah, it'd be hard to tell TikTokers to get off TikTok.
Right.
I
Yeah. You probably wouldn't spread virally if you said,
Yeah.
get off this app.
I
Well, you
have
might.
thought that like this is a use of bots, that
Yeah.
we need the social media bots
Yes.
that basically go out and evangelize against social media.
Totally.
You
Totally.
know, just
Yeah.
nonstop all day.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like, this is the terrible place to be. You should log off now.
I love this. Yeah, this is words to live by from an OG technology,
Yeah, man.
commentator. Go outside is the is the advice. That's what I'm
Good
hearing.
word.
Yeah,
That can be the issue title or the
yeah,
episode
right
title.
on.
Go outside.
Go outside.
Go touch
Nice.
grass.
Get on my lawn. There we go.
Yeah, get on my lawn. Get on your lawn, maybe. Yeah.
Come on my lawn. I got a nice lawn. We got a pond out here.
Nice.
Come visit.
I
Yeah,
love
that's right.
it. Awesome. Great advice, Adam. Thanks so much for spending all this time with us.
Uh,
Really great conversation in part one
Always
and
a
part
pleasure.
two. And yeah, really fun talking to you. Thanks again. Adam Engst of TidBITS, tidbits.com. Thanks again.
Ciao.